Welcome to Film Phreeks. This is Justin Llewellyn.
G. Williams.
And tonight we're going to be doing another retrospective of a major big franchise that we've been wanting to discuss for quite a while, but it wasn't until recently when I finally decided to uh, rewatch all of them as a fresh rewatch to get my mind and fully watch the sequels of it. And that franchise we're going to be talking about is the Jaws series. And this is the film that basically actually started the whole blockbuster genre back in 1975 with the original film directed by Steven Spielberg. And uh, before we begin, I here to get into some backstory. This is actually a series that, believe it or not, other than the first one, I was kind of hit and miss with growing up because when I was a kid, I always had a thing about with sharks growing up and stuff. And when I was a kid, I always kind of after watching the first Jaws, it kind of always made me scared about sharks and stuff. So this is actually the film that basically where it basically made to be scared of going into the water, as the tagline always said. You know.
And the first, like you were saying, scared to go in the water. And this film ended up, the very first one, which we're about to get into, ended up being one of the best and biggest masterpiece creature features of all time, even in my opinion. And it, like you said, it spawned it changed film
It
forever,
did. It
especially
did,
for the
but
creature.
it did absolutely. It not only it became the first prototypical summer blockbuster at the time because essentially to where it was cool to make like a summer movie and make it to where people would go like line up on the blocks and stuff and be able to see a big movie like this that would go on to make a huge box office returns. This pretty much put that genre into perspective with it. But before we
Yeah,
get into
not
that,
uh, I'd like to also add on that the film is still holds up as one of the greatest creature features of all time. And honestly, there's little areas throughout the country. I don't know anywhere else in the world, but in the U.S. And I am destined to try it once. I have to, where they are actually do a Jaws annual showing of the first movie, where you actually watch it on a drive-in theater, but you're in water. I always want to do that. I think they do it down in Texas somewhere, and they're gonna be one day. I'm gonna go down there and do that.
yeah, it'd be really fun. But before we get into the movie, to get into some backstory, believe it or not, this is actually I actually got this was actually talked about behind the scenes as one of the biggest production hells that the movie went through behind the scenes. Because before the movie even came out, while it was in development and under production, it went through quite some heavy stuff that they had to work with, especially with Steven Spielberg, who was coming off of doing movies like Duel and stuff. It was his major foray of basically putting making him become like the biggest director that was coming in fresh with a new way of bringing these type of movies together. And
Yeah,
behind the scenes, it pretty much showed that when they first worked around, it was going to be a lot of troublesome because they had to deal with like not only from the problems with the shark itself that they were built from the actual special effects crew, but also just other things where actors were getting kind of some of the actors would not really get along with each other. There was supposedly stunt crew that were not experienced. There was a lot of stories that went along with the movie that kind of made the movie cursed in some way.
and I believe before this movie was even made, Steven Spielberg was only considered an independent filmmaker. So this is the first official film that made Spielberg who he is today.
Yeah,
So there's that. Yeah, you are right. There was a lot of beef, and a lot of it was actually between Richard Dreyfuss and the guy
Robert
who played
Shaw.
Quint, like Robert Shaw. There was a lot of beef between, but yeah, it wasn't just the actors alone. There was a lot of just tension between behind the screen set. Like people who you don't think really matter in the film, like that do like the offset shit, like behind screens, were even battling. And there was a
Yeah.
lot of tension where it held off production. They had to find new people. There's people that were in and out of the door. because it couldn't handle I mean, it was considered one of still Spielberg's toughest movies he ever made. Shockingly, to this day, it still is, compared to everything else he's done, because it was a stressful thing to do. But I think it worked out in the end because they were looking for perfection,
They
and
were, yeah, and
a
it also
lot of,
helped.
like you were saying, it had a lot of issues making that shark. And out of all films, the first one of all, which is the masterpiece of them all, the rest aren't really masterpieces. They had trouble with the first one more than they did with 2, 3, and 4. I guess it's because 2, 3, and 4 they didn't really care at the time. It was just the first movie they really, really wanted to change cinema forever. And I also believe this is based off a book.
It is, yes. It's based off of the book it's by Peter Benchley, is what it was called, who wrote it. And and what was also interesting was that it's sort of loosely based on a true story in some regard, because there were actual real known shark cases that took place in real life that got the idea from Spielberg to pretty much make something like this for its storyline that it was going with. And because you got to think
Uh,
at the time, it wasn't really like big when it came to sharks, but there were known reports of about people that were getting like injured around certain areas from shark attacks.
You're basically saying that around the time the movie was made, it wasn't really known up in the New England area as having shark problems. And I'm thinking maybe that's what inspired the book and the movie
Yeah,
itself. Was usually shark attacks, they've always happened. They didn't just sporadically show up the year they made Jaws. The shark attacks happen worldwide, and it's never ever stopped. It's
right,
just
right,
it's
right. That's what the book
knowing.
was inspired by.
Yeah, it was mostly known for like Florida and stuff, but yeah, I guess it had a lot to do with, because this movie takes place, the first one takes place heavily in New England area, which is up by like, it's kind of like up by Nantucket, like kind of Massachusetts area, is so to speak, is the location. And they aren't really well known for like sharks for one, and two, I think like you were saying, it was based off a story that a shark was possibly, in theory, haunting a certain area, and it was killing people. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, here we go with our retrospective of Jaws, and we're gonna start off with none other than the very first masterpiece.
Yep. And this one was uh, stars Roy Schneider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Lorraine Gary, and among others. And it's already from the get go from this movie, like it already puts you in the right type of suspense, because the moment when we start to introduce the girl that's introduced in the film, Chrissy, and the part where she basically has this guy that she gets from that's drinking and all that, they end up wanting to go skinny dipping. You all can already tell that we're in for a ride, because when what's interesting about this whole scene is that there's a part when she goes skinny dipping, it's all in like very dark, to where it's kind of hard, it's very hard, it's hard to tell. And that to me is not only great a way of hiding when the shark is able to attack, but also it really builds a lot of great atmosphere, the way it's lit and everything.
I agree with you there, because the opening scene is phenomenal, because it's one of the rare occasions where the lighting is really off, but in a sense of good. And the fact that you know something's coming, but you don't know where it's coming, and the fact that she's way out there in that kind of dawn kind of look, or dusk kind of look, that kind of, I don't think I would do that, especially not in a fucking ocean. I would probably be scared to do that in a fucking lake, going out that far like that. But yeah, it brings great suspense. Probably one of the most suspenseful scenes, at least in the top 10 of all time. And I can't remember vividly. Is this the scene where we actually hear the most iconic theme ever in cinema ever played? It's by John Williams, and everybody should know by now the donna donna dun dun. I can't remember if it was in that
That's the
scene.
opening credits. That's the opening credits of the film.
Well, it's opening credits, but I was thinking if they played it during that scene too.
I'd have to. It's been a minute since I watched the movie. I'd have to rewatch the opening scene again, but I can't remember.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, that theme would go down as the most classic and most recognized theme of all time.
Absolutely. And what was funny about that, an interesting backstory about that, originally when John Williams only composed that just I think it was just two or three notes of it, a very simple note like that. Originally, Spielberg was against it. He actually didn't want to use the score of it because he wanted to go for a more like kind of adventurous type of like pirate type of music to give the more like kind of ocean exploring type of feel. And it took a minute before Williams was able to convince him, like, hey, this is actually probably going to be actually really great for the movie. And so as they went
Yeah.
along with it, he became impressed, and he wrote more pieces of the score, and it earned his he made it into one of the most iconic themes of all time, and the first collaboration between Mr. Williams and Spielberg.
Yeah, and it's funny that Spielberg, that was probably a bad decision of his part if he wanted to have some adventurous fucking music playing in the background of what would be a slasher creature feature. That would have
Yeah.
been dumb. Glad John Williams won that battle. That would have been painful without that theme. I mean, Jesus Christ, that theme is just too iconic. But and it's one of the good themes that actually I mean, a lot of people don't like music in the background because it kills the suspense. But I still think that the John Williams score is one of the rare occasions where you want the suspense of the music. It creates the mood better.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, get into our
And
story. Like you said, we get our first victim of the movie.
yeah, and then we get introduced to our main protagonist, which or one of our one of the three main protagonists, which is Chief Martin Brody, on the fictional Amy Island, and uh, this is actually one of those occasions where this was actually the first film that I remember watching that got me introduced to Roy Scheider,
It was
sorry, Roy Schneider as an
yeah,
actor, and you can tell that the moments that it becomes very unnerving because the moment when they start because he gets basically called to the beach area after a report comes in about shark attacks, and it becomes a great point to the point where he's having to he really feels like something's going on, and you can feel the tension that something that Brody wants to make try to warn everyone about this, and it becomes a big conflict because he's having to convince the mayor about this, and knowing how the mayor is in a lot of these movies, they don't always listen because he wants to close the beaches and stuff, and it's like,
yeah. What makes Chief Brody so good is another little backstory of his character. Uh, Before he was just newly announced chief of Amityville, and he was actually a former cop in New York, and he just recently moved there, so he has no experience with the ocean. So he's kind of like his character is placed in a world that he's not used to, like he's never seen before.
yeah,
So when this victim, the very first victim killed in this film, which by the way is very scary because I do remember it getting very quiet and nothing on the score, and the way that it's not really just dragging her down at first, and she's very fucking terrified is probably one of the most terrifying scenes.
yeah, it is definitely, and
Yeah,
and the fact that they they don't even show. I don't even think they. Yeah, as far as I remember, they don't even show her afterwards body when they discover her. Like it's just their perspective. Like you just see their reactions to it, and I think that was very good suspense because it makes it feel more mysterious. Like okay, what the hell did this shark do?
well, you kind of get kind of later on in the story, you kind of get the gif of what happened to her, what he did to her, because I don't want to jump into far down the storyline, but yeah. Anyways, Chief Brody is forced to uh, call in an expert, in which we get introduced to Richard Dreyfuss' character, who plays a oceanographer, shark specialist, and pretty much he's there to see because he's questioning uh the dead body, the way how it was torn apart, and the mayor wants to push it off as a boating accident, like a propeller accident. And that's when they bring the oceanographer in because, like you said, there's other victims that, eventually it happens to. Like we get the boy, the what was he known as, the Cosner boy or some shit that
Uh,
gets dragged down.
I think it was the Kittner.
Yeah, Kittner. Yeah, the Kittner boy, and he gets pulled down in broad daylight, which is probably one of the most bloodiest scenes next to Quince. And we see a child in the 70s. This must have been groundbreaking right here. A child getting
And
torn apart.
that was funny because that's interesting because well, it's not funny, but basically, behind the scenes, they actually had intended a even more graphic death for him because originally they were going to have it to where it showed more of the brutality in some of the dailies that they had, but because the shark again. For the better, for the better, the shark was having mechanical problems to where they couldn't keep it in frame or something, and essentially they had to cut it out. And so what we got was plus they also had to, if I believe correctly, they also had to cut the scene down because it was going to cause them to give an R rated, and they had to keep the movie a PG rating.
Yeah. And this is right before PG-13 exists because honestly, today's world with the amount of blood, I think this movie would have got an R rating. I
Yeah,
don't think today would have. I'm surprised they haven't went back to movies and started changing ratings. But
yeah,
anyways, yeah, we get the Kittner boy who gets torn apart, and that's when Chief Brody knows something is lurking in the ocean, and he feels the need that they need to call into a specialist, which we get, like I said, Richard Dreyfuss' character, who's a shark specialist, coming in to kind of, study things. And this is where I was talking about, where you do get a little bit glimpse of what happened to that girl in a more unsettling feel, because when they take out what's left of her, she's in a little box. And that just goes to show, oh my God, you don't need to
yeah.
see it fuck happen. You just go, that's all that's left? Holy fucking hell. Oh my God, that's got to be bad. And you can see they're damn near throwing the fuck up. And that's where, he proves to Brody, he goes, you're right. It isn't a fucking boating accident. It's a shark. It was a shark attack.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And plus, it leaves you with a lot of great, suspense and tension. The way it feels unnerving. And when they do in this film too is that
Well, since I'm on this scene real quick, there's something I do need to really specify, since we're on the scene of the girl getting killed, and Dreyfuss has found her, looking at the body and saying it was a great white. This is the famous scene that actually gave the bad rep of great white sharks in real life, and this is, to this day, it still holds up as, like, people think, oh my God, when it comes to bad sharks, evil and most dangerous sharks, think of great whites. And this actually started controversy over many years after the film, because a lot of people who are really shark enthusiasts really were pissed off that the movie kind of gave great white sharks a bad rep. I remember watching a documentary about that.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and what's interesting about the way it plays it out is that it becomes pretty much a conflict that involves where they're having to deal with getting the beaches closed, and that's one of the things that you really like. You hate pretty much the way the mayor is trying to call like everything, because the way that he's like, nah, keep those beaches open, there ain't no shark. It's always the you know the disbelief about stuff like this happens. But then again, that is something that was common with a lot of monster films back then, because even when you go back to movies like The Blob and stuff, you do have those characters that don't always believe at first sight of like how things are going. So
I I think it's very realistic with the mayor doing that, because I mean, look at today. There's a lot of mayors that ain't taking certain things seriously, and that actually plays in effect today. It's like towns are having their own version of their own mayor of From Jaws, where they don't take shit seriously, like with all the COVID shit going on and the protesting on stuff. But that's on the side note. But uh, going back to the movie itself, so Dreyfus's character, he's pretty much confirmed it was it came from a great white,
Yeah.
and now they're and not only that when you talk about the mayor wanting to stay closed, doesn't want to close, you got to also take into the story the reason being behind his version of why he doesn't want to close is this town is actually makes it 80% of its revenue out of tourism. So it's in the highest mist of tourism, and he knows that if he shuts it down, the town will go broke. So you've got this whole conflict of, what do we do? And you're stuck in this bad situation where you're like, ignorancy is and money and greed is overshadowing people's lives, and you're kind of stuck. What do we do?
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
I that whole build up, and this movie does take quite a while before we start getting to our infamous middle third act,
Right.
and
Because we
there's a lot
also,
of
right.
we get to
Because we
see
also,
and we get to know his family, his
Mhm.
his wife and his two little children, and you can see Brody, he's the type of cop that just pretty much is dedicated to his job and really really cares about you know people actually losing their lives, and he's really focusing on trying to put a stop to this, and paranoia ends up taking place into him.
Yeah, and you can really see a lot of the stress that it puts a lot of them and the fear that it takes place with it, which uh we'll get to this here. Of course, we'll get to this shit later because they really fucked that up in one of the later films with that. But you still, on a realistic point, I like the way they build with his character in this. How he's, trying to make sure everyone's safety and everything, and try to get to the bottom of what this shark is and stuff. And I gotta admit too that there's also some pretty creepy. There's actually some pretty intense scenes that I forgot about in this movie upon after rewatching, like the part uh, one of the where the part um, where Richard Dreyfuss's character Hooper ends up going down the water and discovers that dead body of that fisherman. Like that just came out of nowhere. There's some really like shocking scenes that happened that I forgot was in the movie.
Yeah, there's a scene also we forgot that ends up being the third victim where a guy was boating. And this is where you actually kind of, without seeing the shark, getting how big is this fucking shark? Because this guy is fishing off a pier, off a big ass dock, and it takes the fucking dock and him. And you're like, holy shit, this thing has to be fucking huge. I loved what Spielberg did with the writing on this because and the writer, because the way the direction is, he slowly gives us little snippets of how big this fucker is. It's like, okay, it's a regular shark. Then it's like, damn, this might be a medium sized shark, And then like when it ripped that dock and took that dude, you're like, holy fucking hell, how big is this fucking son of a bitch? And it
Absolutely.
really built. So
And
now going back to where we got Brody, I like how like he's new in town and he's got a lot on his plate and he's really stressing out over everything. He's got so many people trying to get answers and he's like lost. So he ends up hiring pretty much a bunch of people around town. Not to mention people travel a great distance to come hunt the shark down after the Kittner boy died, and they put bounty on the shark and people start showing up. And I did like, it does have its like really uppity scores too, especially around this scene where, I think it kind of makes you happy. It's like it's the calm before the storm. And in this scene, we get to see more where we get to meet Hooper. This is before what we were talking about, where he saw the girl's body. And then I do want to mention this scene because this scene I always like to go back to because it's kind of funny. Kind of reminds me of the scene where like off of Back to the Future where they throw the damn the what you call it at the fucking principal
oh, the paper
flying
plane.
paper plane and it flies right by him and he's just like it's just little scenes like that makes you laugh. And there's actually a funny scene where Brody doesn't have time to talk to Hooper, and so he tells Hooper, he's like, "Hey, tell those guys to get off that boat. They're gonna sink." And then he tells him to get off that boat, and they pretty much talk shit to Hooper. And Hooper's like, do you know where I can find a good place to eat or rest or something? The guy goes, yeah, just walk straight ahead, referring to walk off the dock and go in the water.
Yep.
Hooper's like, yeah, they're gonna fucking die.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
The movie's not mainly focused on that shit, but just little scenes like that kind of remind me of the funny little scene in Back to the Future of the airplane
Right.
thing. I like watching that scene over again.
Well, not to mention, we also get one of the best like character introductions of all time, and to one of the greatest on
Before you
like
before you jump that far, you got to also think that they end up Hooper and Brody kind of like going like they get to know each other and they drank and they decide to take the boat out, and that's where you get the scene where you said where he was scuba diving and he finds the body and stuff, and then they actually do catch a shark, and people well, they don't catch a shark, they find the body and stuff, but those people I was talking about that came around the world, around the country to kill the shark, kills a shark, and it's actually a pretty good sized tiger shark,
yeah.
and it ends up long shark, and that's where Brody feels like he's stuck with nothing, and then now we get to the best scene, the biggest entry of a character, pretty much what completes what I like to call the best trio in a film, and this is where we get introduced to Quint, played by Robert Shaw.
Yes. Well, he is introduced earlier in the film because after the young boy gets killed, there's a bounty place, and his introduction comes when he pretty much offers the services when he's when he's doing the little scratching on the board and stuff, and
Yeah.
it shows that he's a guy that is ready to go after the shark, and there's a really good backstory that we'll get into later on, but the mysterious vibe that he has and stuff, you can tell that he's not holding back and he wants to go for it, and he's offering $10,000 to kill the shark, basically.
Yeah,
And,
and yeah, I remember that. I still to this day I cannot listen to that fucking finger scratching the chalkboard. That's like one of my little, oh, it's like one of my pet peeves. So I usually have to turn that down when that happens. But
yeah,
yeah, it's classic Robert Shaw. And his man, talk about what a fucking actor. And yes, he truly fucking died young. It's a
I
shame
did.
that
And what's interesting
later.
about Robert Shaw is that he also stayed in character at times, to get into character, so to speak. Behind the
Yeah,
scenes, Robert Shaw would be drinking a lot. He would actually be drinking a lot to really get the vibe of his character. And there would actually be times where, not to jump the gun, there's the scene where like him and Hooper are drinking and stuff. There was actually behind the scenes, he was actually legitimately drunk, and then he basically the next day thought that he called Spielberg and he was like, did how did that come out good? Did that come out all right? And then he basically he came back in to do the scene again because they if I recall they actually kept it in there, that the scene where they're actually drinking.
yeah. I think everybody who was drinking that scene actually were legitly drinking. That's what made the scene so real. But yeah, not jumping the gun. So he gets the offer, and Quint comes off like this hardcore sailor kind of drunk, and I think it fits the persona, wherever you call it, say that word,
Protagonist.
persona, projection of the character of sailors, drunks, and stuff. But he ends up being a guy who's pretty much well known for, and you get that kind of feel when you go to his kind of domain where he works at, and he's killed thousands of sharks and all kinds of fucking animals
Well,
in the sea. So
well,
they come to
it's
find out
funny.
where Brody looks and realizes he's the man for the job.
Yeah, and what's funny about that scene was that because earlier in the film, you get the idea that supposedly because there was actually a deleted scene where he was going to have a guy go with him, his assistant to go with him to the actual on the actual journey. But there in the deleted scene, the guy basically wants to quit because he feels like he's not onto this. And the reason why this becomes important is because if you notice in the film, that scene where Dreyfus is basically looking away off screen, that was intended to be a deleted scene that they were supposed to keep in there for it. But because they cut it, the reason why they cut it out is because the actor behind the scenes was an extra and he came off as it, and he wasn't really much of an actor. So that Spielberg felt that it just wasn't really, probably the best kind of the scene to keep in there. But you can tell from the way he's like rambling when he goes up the stairs and stuff. Had they would have kept that deleted scene in there, you could understand why he was rambling about you can't hire people worth nothing these days when he says that line.
And it's cool because we get when we actually get the trio finally together, we get to see Robert Shaw and Hooper's kind of dynamic duel towards each other, and they come off, because Robert Shaw is like this hardcore, I've been through some shit kind of guy, and Hooper's this preppy boy who went to college.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of fucking picks on him throughout this whole entire scene, saying he doesn't have man hands. And this is the scene where they're actually planning on going out to the ocean and looking for the shark. And they're getting ready to take the boat out and all that stuff. And this is where Brody is actually wants to come along because I believe it's their boat anyway. So he's pretty much got to be there. I can't remember why he went. What was his purpose of going? I
Because,
guess.
well, also you got to remember too, earlier in the film, Brody's son was also almost getting killed by the shark too, and
Oh,
so
yeah. So it becomes more of a personal thing. So he wants to be there
mhm.
and them to destroy this thing once and for all. And this is you get that classic scene where he's giving Hooper fucking hell, and it's funny because their chemistry dude together is fucking great. I mean, them bickering back and forth, and you get more of it later on throughout the film. That golly, man, they're just when them two are on screen is just fucking just phenomenal.
Exactly, and it's just, but not only that, but there's two things that really stand out for me the best with the way their chemistry signs in this is that whole tavern scene where they're basically talking about their scars and stuff, about how they've been into some shit.
I was gonna get to that later,
But
and I'm
yeah,
staying duty
but
on
yeah,
that.
but what I love about this is that they have to pretty much like kind of understand like the sharks kind of like to hook it and everything. And when they're going down deep and everything, they're trying to like understand like estimate its length and weight and stuff. And they yeah, I believe this is also where they get into where they end up actually having the shark actually come out like an hour into the movie, and he makes his first appearance or whatever, and where he just actually comes out of the water.
Yeah, basically you skipped ahead, but yeah, they're now officially we got in the boat and they're on their journey to take the shark down, and this is where we get to see how big the shark is, and it ends up being like a 25-footer. I mean, you get a lot of like up and down scenes throughout this entire middle to final act, where you feel like things are going normal, then shit goes down south, and then you get the infamous shark scene where you see him. He ends up being like a 25-footer, and this is where like you get these three guys pretty much trying to capture the shark and failing at everything possible. They shoot the spears at it to try to put trackers into it. It doesn't work. It just keeps failing. And pretty much you get to the infamous, what I call probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, is when they're pretty much, it's more of the laid back scene where they're pretty much drinking. And going back to what you said earlier, the whole drinking thing and was realistic. And they're comparing scars, which this is the part where you feel like them two it's a man's man scene because everybody's drinking and Hooper and Shaw don't have a lot of they don't like each other. There's a lot of tension throughout throughout them being out in the ocean where he's bitching at Hooper for playing with cards and bitching at Hooper. He's just giving Hooper hell. He's like a drill sergeant type
Mm-hmm.
guy. You actually learn why he's like that and pretty soon after they start comparing scars. And it's a funny scene because I mean it's like comparing dicks or something, and like I got this and from that, and I got this from that. They're just, they're like, I'll drink to your leg, I'll drink to your leg, just having a good old time. And it's funny because Robert Shaw really doesn't have any fucking thing to really show other than a little scar. Now, here's a little backstory on that from what I was told. Now, they don't talk about it in the movie. They just, I guess you could just say appendix, but there's actually in the book, uh, there's a reason why Brody left Brooklyn in New York City, and he was actually shot in the line of duty. But they don't ever go into that.
Oh wow, yeah, that would have been interesting if they would have kept that in there.
Apparently, that's in the book that Brody left the city life because he got shot in the line of duty. So
Oh
that
wow.
scene where it shows its scar, they don't talk about it at all. So people just say they just leave it off as maybe he had surgery on his appendix, and they kind of change it. They don't really go into no detail at all. So, but that scar is actually supposed to be a bullet wound, but they don't
Oh
go into that. So, anyways, going back to this comes where we get the most, well, one of the two most infamous improv lines of the movie. While it is scripted, it is kind of improv at the same time. And this is where we get the most, probably the most, I mean, nerve-wracking dialogue scenes I ever witnessed in a movie from an actor. And this is the part where um, Hooper talks about this tattoo thing he has covered and goes, "Hey, don't tell me, mother, right? Mother." And then starts laughing. He goes, "No, that's the USS Indianapolis, which is a famous ship that was sunk by the Japanese and sunk underwater, and most of the crew got ate by sharks." And
yeah.
he was on Indianapolis, and he goes and, oh my God, Robert Shaw. This was an Oscar-winning dialogue right here. I'm sorry, it was. This should have won him an Oscar.
It was that whole speech that he gives about surviving about from the Indianapolis and stuff. It's not only very chilling, but it's very you really get the you finally get to really see his side of how everything comes into play and how he feels about taking down the shark and stuff. And it's very well written. It's very well acted, well written, and it really comes off that it showcases that Robert Shaw definitely could have been nominated for an Oscar for this performance.
Oh my God, he should have had a fucking Oscar nomination for this, even a win, man. He really defined his character and the reason why he is who he is. And the shit he personally watched. He watched best friends getting ripped and shredded apart, bobbing up and down, seeing his friends tipping them over, only see their bottom half ripped out. It's just, I mean, that will fuck a man's head up. And that's the reason why, Shaw is the way he is in this film. When I mean, he's
Yeah,
just really fucked in the head. And I love they gave him it built his character even stronger. Not to mention, without the dialogue, his character was already phenomenal. But still, it leveled it out. It made his character complete. And
absolutely.
that's why about the scene. And then when that happens, we get the infamous first time when the shark is actually attacking the boat. And this is
Yeah,
actually don't I don't want to forget the funny song where they're singing
show
show
me the way to go home.
me I'm tired and I want to go to bed. I mean, you could. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, I wish I lived that decade, that year, and could have been in that movie and just had a drink with Shaw, Hooper, and Brody.
hmm Absolutely. And don't forget, I mean, I know we're kind of backtracking, but not to backtrack here, but even when they bring in you got to also think too, the movie was also dealing with a lot of improv behind the scenes because they didn't have a finished script when they were shooting some scenes, and so when they came to it, the scene where earlier where Brody is saying the famous line, "You're going to need a bigger boat." That was actually improvised at the spot because they didn't have a script. And so a lot of and it shows a lot of the genuine, responses that the movie puts you in that kind of, situation that I
And
really liked of.
when when Roy Scheider gives us uh, that line, that tagline, "You're going to need a bigger boat," when he's throwing the guts in the water and it comes out, you realize how big the motherfucker is, the bite radius. and he knows right then and there that some bitch is 10 times bigger in our boat. And he says that we're going to need a bigger boat. Actually became an iconic line that's actually improv in so many movies and
It
repeated.
is.
Put
It
on
is. But
shark
also, but when we get
to
to the yes, absolutely, and it's been parodied a lot too. But when we actually get the shark actually attacking and stuff, then this is where the shit hits the fan because now it becomes to where uh they're pretty much slowly losing the boat to the point where it's slowly sinking after a while, and they end up they preparing to pretty much sever the line to prevent the transform from being pulled out, and essentially it comes to a point where, as a last resort, they end up doing a more riskier approach by having Hooper going inside this shark cage and put him underwater.
yep.
And so, which would later, and because what they plan to do is basically get the shark killed with strychnine, injected with strychnine, using the spear that they have, and
Yeah.
it
Always.
yeah. And then while they're doing this, the shark ends up pretty much rubbing on the cage and stuff. And this is where you get to see more of what the shark looks like and everything. And like we were saying earlier, it's great that they keep it a lot more like very in the shadows, so to speak, where you're not really seeing too much of it. Because, like we are saying, when behind the scenes, the fact that it had a lot of mechanical problems, you don't always see a whole lot of the shark movements when it's underwater and stuff.
You hear a cool backstory on that. There's scenes where you actually see the shark, like if the camera's underwater and it's like looking up and seeing the sharks and stuff. That's actually they paid actual people that go out and like swim with sharks. Those are actual real footages of sharks.
Oh wow.
So that is a little fun fact I read about where some of the backdrop scenes where you see it from the distance, it's a real shark. And that's what gives it more realistic when it's far away. And then whenever it comes up to you, I still think the effect hold up. I think they did very
They
well
do.
with it.
They do, and
The
and
part he ends up ripping Hooper's cage out, where Hooper pretty much sinks down to the bottom of the ocean
mhm.
from the attack, and we're left to believe something's possibly happened to Hooper, but we won't know until the very end of the film. And then we get to the famous line where the famous part of the movie, one of the other famous parts of the movie, where the shark pretty much goes at the boat and jumps and leaps into the boat and sinks it. And
Yeah,
then we get probably the most, oh my god, grueling death out of the whole entire fucking movie. And sadly, this is the part where we lose Quint, and he falls into the mouth of the shark, and you could see the struggle and fear in his eyes because they don't just make this like something that's done today where you're just killed or just out of shock and all. This one is really scary because he's trying to hold on to Chief Brody's hand, and then he's trying to kick the shark's mouth, just fighting for his life, begging to not go in there, and he unfortunately does, and he gets bit, and it is gruesome.
oh yeah, it is, and it's definitely the scene that pretty much became the most brutalist part of the movie. And actually surprised that scene alone didn't give him the R rating, because you get. But not only that, what's cool about this is he went out as a fucking hero because he takes out his knife and he's trying to fucking stab the shark while he's slowly going into his mouth. It just shows
Yep.
he ain't holding back. That to me is dedication right there.
When the shark bites into him, he fucking keeps stabbing him. Then he has that loud last scream where all the blood just gargles out of his mouth, and then, yep, Quint's history. And
Yeah,
this is where the boat is officially sinking. And pretty much Brody, the least experienced of them, is left no other than to trying to fight for survival. And there's a part where he's in the boat, and the shark actually busts in, tries to kill him, and Brody, not thinking really, he just naturally throws in this tank into the mouth, and
mhm.
that's when Brody is trying to find, try to get above, as high up from the ocean as possible. And we get the probably the biggest classic, the ending, the final climax where everybody talks about, everybody brings it up as like one of the best closures of the film. This is when the shark is
pretty much charging at him, and Brody only has a few bullets left, and he realizes, holy shit, I threw that tank in his mouth, and it's still stuck in his mouth. I'm gonna shoot it, and you get the famous music playing while he's doing it, and then he does the other classic line, "Smile, you son of a bitch," and then boom,
Yeah,
boom,
and he just
and
explodes.
yep, kills the shark.
Yep. And then pretty much he ends up after that we end up getting him and Hooper reunite after Hooper comes back from the underneath the water, and they end up slowly going back to the island, and it all ends.
Now
So
from here on, right here, this personally, and we're about to talk about the second one next, but honestly, this is a film that stood the test of the time. It is the best creature feature ever made, as far as animal killing movies. It is a fucking masterpiece that will never, should never, it needs to be blacklisted as ever being touched on a remake, ever. It
yeah,
can never be. This film is like Wizards of Oz, where you can't, it's not allowed to be touched. And
yeah.
honestly, if they never continued, that would have been, I would have been happy because this movie really was of its own movie.
It was. It's definitely a film that not only was it's a self-contained film for one, where it really doesn't really set it doesn't really even set it doesn't set up sequels. It's very self-contained. It wraps the story up very really perfectly, and just all around, it's a masterpiece. It's an expert in filmmaking. It's beautifully shot with the cinematography. The performances are all A+, and it's basically what you're given for when you want to make not only just a creature feature, but an actual a really good. It's about the characters. It's about how it's more about the story first over it is with its special effects, and that's what a lot of the sequels unfortunately don't go through when it comes with the first movie's vibe.
Exactly. And like me, man, the performances from Roy Schneider, fucking Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw, man, those three are fucking unreplaceable. You can't replaceable. You can't replace them. They they define the movie. The character development, the story, it just it just draws you in. It's kind of hard to explain. And to this day, Jaws remains as my top 50 favorite films of all time. And what can I say? Everything was done to perfection. And this defined Spielberg's career. It defined everybody.
It
And
did.
and the fact that Robert or Robert Stahl passed away 2 years after this movie from a sudden heart attack. Man, oh my god, that hurts because that guy, even though he's been in a lot of shit that I'm not really familiar with because they were so old, I feel like this movie would have made him into even bigger films that we would be familiar with. And the
Absolutely.
John Williams gives us such a great score. I mean, what can I say about this that hasn't been said? It is phenomenal. And with that being said, saying enough, this is a high phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter for me.
It is the same as well. It will go down. It's a high phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter. It's definitely, I'd say it's in my top, yeah, it's about in my top five favorite Spielberg films of all time, and it's definitely the best shark film of all time. So,
Oh, it definitely, there ain't a shark film that ever come close. I'm sorry. I don't give a fuck what you say about good shark films, and there has been some good ones, but there's nothing that can touch Jaws. There's nothing will ever touch it. It can't
exactly.
be matched. It can't be repeated. It's done. It's officially stamped forever as the best shark film ever made. But yeah, it's in my top 50 favorite films of all time.
Yep. Fair enough. Now, after Jaws came out, this was basically like we were saying earlier. It landmarked as a fucking blockbuster. It became basically the film that it was the highest grossing film that came out, and to this day, it's made. I guess adjusting inflation or so, it's made $470 million. And when it came out, believe it or not, when it came out back in its day when its first theatrical run, it it earned about let's see, The box office take in 1975 alone was it grossed a record of uh, it brought in 123 million dollars in its theatrical run
God damn, four?
in
Holy shit,
1975.
dude! 75. That's a record. That was unheard of back then. That much. A fucking $10 million movie in the 70s was fucking huge.
Yeah,
Holy shit, I didn't know it made it that much. God dang. No wonder it was considered of its time as the highest grossing film of ever in history of its
it
time.
it made it sailing past the it basically be well I'm sorry I stand corrected, it was 100 million its first 59 days alone, and its initial release it brought in 123.1 million in rentals. That right there shows the movie was like out of this fucking world.
Yeah. I don't even
And
think Star Wars did.
it was the highest grossing film up until Star Wars.
Okay. Until Star Wars go. But
Yeah,
still, movies were unheard of to make that much money. It was. There
yeah.
was nowhere near that in detail. So yeah, it stood the test of its time.
Yep. And then after the movie pretty much wrapped, it became the legacy of creating a lot of films that would basically become later knockoffs of it. And we would get also, it was condoned with merchandise, it let people be able to, the impact that it led with people going to like beaches and stuff. It, created pretty much that like kind of like fear at first upon watching the film, but people like have grown to appreciate the movie of what it did to be aware of how shark movies are and stuff, about how sharks are and everything. And you got to also think too, when the movie came out, after its release there were a lot of films that I haven't seen, but they pretty much became like the animal type of creatures that we would see that are kind of knockoffs, like Orca, the Great White. There would be other films like a lot of Italian exploitation films in the 70s and 80s that would basically be kind of knockoffs of the movie, including one you remember. I remember you telling me about called Alligator. So there were a lot of films that
Yeah,
basically were akin to Jaws when it came out.
yeah. There's some other ones came out like Alligator, Piranha, quite a few. I mean, everybody was when they realized what Jaws did to cinema. Everybody wanted to be that level, and they did it with Alligator, Piranha, and all that. It just didn't come close. They didn't really get what Spielberg really truly did with the movie Jaws. So
Yeah,
we later now get into Jaws 2 now.
yeah. Jaws 2 was a film that pretty much showed that, you know, at this in his career, basically Spielberg always said that he wasn't always up for a sequel because he wanted to move on to other things, and he didn't really want to do. I guess in his mind he didn't want to tarnish what the first film had involved with, and so he was he hammered out a there was because of his contract of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he actually couldn't be able to take he couldn't take the film for because it was a gap too long for the producers. So basically, when he was doing Close Encounters, he couldn't work on Jaws 2, and neither and also Richard Dreyfuss didn't want to come back either because essentially it was established that he felt like he didn't want to come back to it. And Roy Scheider actually didn't want to come back because he felt like he had to basically he was actually up for the role of the deer hunter to play Robert De Niro's part, but he had to quit to basically start filming of this movie. And the reason why he had to come in because he signed a three-picture deal with Universal, and the studio said that had he appeared in Just, that he was contractually obligated to do this film along with two other movies at the time.
Yeah. And yeah, no one really wanted to come back because this film stood the test of its time and didn't, they thought, it would work. Uh, they all, I mean, they rightfully were true. They weren't wrong about begging not to be in the film because really it needed to just be one thing. And so, but still, we ended up getting Jaws 2. Of course, the money
the box office, the mass hysteria around the first film, production companies sped up the sequel to it.
Yeah, and also I read that Richard Dreyfuss didn't come back because Spielberg didn't direct it, so he felt that it was one of those cases because Spielberg was involved, it just didn't feel right for him to come back in the second one. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, with Draws 2, believe it or not, this is a film that I saw glimpses of when I was a kid, but I didn't get to fully watch until recently in its entirety. And what's a coincidence is that this film was it uses the tagline just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water, which became actually pretty famous in its own right, and it's actually been
Yeah.
parodied in homage and other stuff too.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that when this movie came out, coincidentally, it came out the same year as Halloween did, and you can tell that the film was kind of going for more of a slasher type of vibe this time because it was basically, in this story, getting into it, it deals with a great white shark that comes back and that comes into play and kills a couple scuba divers that were photographing the wreckage of the actual ship from the first movie, and so they actually do get to show some references to the first movie with that going on, and
Lord.
yeah, and basically it becomes yet again Chief Brody end up having to come back and believes that the shark is responsible for these events, and it basically becomes more of a slasher type feel in this one because you're starting to deal with a new set of cast members that are primarily teenagers this time.
Yeah.
And it also deals with pretty much, Brody having to go through the same concerns to the mayor again, like the first film. And once again, it's one of those cases where they're having their disagreements about the shark being the problem and everything. And it kind of takes a seat. It takes a back seat as far as its character development this time because unlike the first film where we had like a lot of build with Brody, they don't really like give him a little too much to work with around here. But from what they do with it, they do show more about like he basically becomes as the movie progresses, he becomes a badass in this that I actually really enjoy of his character.
But all right. First and foremost, but before we get into deep into the story, I gotta admit that, like I said, Jaws 1, the first original, really needs to be its own movie. It really did. However, I'm gonna say this because it's already made. I personally find this to be the only likable and quite a little bit underrated sequel.
I
Now,
agree.
is it on par with the one? Fuck, no, it's not. It's a big step down. However, I did like the new changes without really trying to carbon copy because really they know they're never going to top the first one. So what are they going to do? Oh, slashers are becoming a thing. Let's do it in a slasher type of way. And this one I also like because now we get into, like you said, the story with Brody. Brody actually plays a guy who's got post-traumatic stress disorder from the events from the first movie, and he's actually petrified of the water. And without bringing Hooper back, they did manage to bring back all of the people, like the
Yeah,
city
they brought
council,
back. Yeah, they brought
wife,
back the wife, and they brought back the mayor, and I don't
city
know if they
council,
had no. I don't think they brought the same kids back because they were a little older in this one.
the city council, the city council, the
That's right.
girl.
Yeah,
Like if you pay attention to the council, like that works with the mayor, it's literally the same actors. So they got everybody back on board, Hooper. So they couldn't get that character back, but they do actually hit him being on a phone later in the story when shit hits the fan and Brody needs him back because Brody really, because what I love about this film is Brody really is having a hard time while the shit's hitting the fan again. He feels like he's really alone in this movie, which he is. And I think that's actually quite a good idea because now he doesn't have a shark killers expert or a marine biologist shark specialist with him. He's now
yeah,
got to deal with matters on his own hands. Not to mention, his kids are now starting to grow up. And basically, the story, to sum it up without having to go more detail like we did with Jaws,
basically the story goes where the Brody's kids and they're now kind of like teenagers now. Well, one of them is, the other one's kind of an adolescent, getting up in the teenage age, but the other one's more high school age. And pretty much them and a bunch of kids decide to take these boats that skip school, take these, or I think it was school or something they skipped or something. I think it was school. And they skip out and they pretty much go on this big boat, get on boats, a bunch of kids, and they want to go to this island to go party.
Yeah, that's right. And it becomes, yeah, they're in school, and it's, I think it's in the summertime, I believe, and
Yeah.
or not the summertime, but I can't remember, but basically, yeah, they're trying to get away, and they're trying to go, like, follow with a group of their friends and stuff, and take the boat out and things like that, and it's basically becomes like you would see in a lot of later slasher films that were the big boom after Halloween came out. And this is while this is going on, we're pretty much
Yeah,
we're pretty much
shark
having, huh?
attacks starting to happen yet again. People are getting killed left and right, and Brody is now facing his demons yet again of dealing with another shark and having to convince the mayor and the council it's happening again. It's starting again, but only this time he hasn't really nobody to really back him up more in this film, so he actually loses his job in this movie.
Yeah, they actually vote him out as chief of police, and coming from the mayor, and it ends up also becoming to where um, Brody's son Mike is pretty much having to go see all of his friends and stuff. Not having to really listen to his dad on some things, and after a while, it ends up also that gets to a point where the shark actually, and what's interesting about this time is that the shark actually encounters a woman at one point in a boat, and actually gets caught on fire, and half its face gets fucking burned, and it ends up actually uh like actually becomes like Two-Face fucking shark. And I thought, it actually shows that this is a lot even like stronger shark than the last one, even though on a realistic point, I don't think that would probably work in real life, but it still puts the stakes at odds with it. I thought that on a movie standpoint, it actually kind of worked for that.
I mean, the whole realistic approach starts going away a little bit with this one, but in a way, it ups the ante on like how powerful the shark is, trying to make him more. I mean, it doesn't get batshit crazy like 3 and 4, but it gets to a more subdued level where it's kind of believable because now you get the shark lurking and he's there. Yeah, he kills that girl and she fucks up trying to kill the damn shark, but instead blows her own self up, and
Yeah.
it ends up hurt. The shark is still doable because he's big and feisty like the first movie, and pretty much Brody, yeah, like I said, he's got like post-traumatic stress disorder. His kids are never allowed to swim the ocean. They defy his his orders, and upon sneaking out, the little brother, catches him and says, "Please take me with you." He ends up doing it, and they go out in the ocean with all these kids, and they pretty much go to this island where they could party. And pretty much the whole movie is these kids on a boat, on several boats, and the shark is now after these kids. And this is where Brody gets word. This is after his firing. Brody gets into kind of drinking problems and trying to numb the pain and shit. And then that's realized his kids ain't at home. And somebody said he gets kind of news and whiffed that his kids are actually went out with a bunch of kids out to
Yeah.
this island. And they're on a boat right now. And this is where we get into the slashing part where the shark is pretty much picking everybody off one by one. And I will tell you what I did like about this film, it knows that it can't top the first on story driven. So I like the slasher mood of this where we get a really high body count
We
in
do,
this film.
yeah. That is one of the things I really do appreciate. And going back, yeah, I do like the whole post traumatic feel that we get with Treat Brody this time. How he's drinking, he's dealing with the shit from the first one that's taking a toll. Him trying to protect his family and everything. I like the movie combines that with the whole slasher film where you're getting the snark sneaking up on them and stuff on people and everything, and the body count gets higher and stuff. And I believe it or not, what's actually interesting was they actually pretty much, even though it's still rated PG, of course, they actually marked some more brutal shit this time compared to the first one, which I was surprised with in some scenes
Yeah,
with the shark.
this is the one where like you or was that the first one where the guy got attacked and the leg gets torn off?
I think that was the second one.
Where the guy was like, "Hey, what do you guys?" No, that was the first one where they were in that little canal thing,
That's
that
right.
little
Now,
thing, right in that. But yeah, this one does have like a more brutal count. Like you're seeing them all get killed one by one. The shark is like really not playing games with people because it's taking down like everybody's boat one by one, and people are forced to try to work together to try to get to this island before they're all killed off. And they're getting closer and closer, but not fast enough. And as they're getting closer, more and more people are just, they're getting picked off. And one of the scenes that probably stick out to me the most was you follow this girl who is really terrified, and she's really close to the little boy, and she ends up, there's a scene where their boat flips, and she's trying to save him. She saves him by getting him on top of the boat, but then she's trying to get on top of the boat, but instead the shark gets her in time and really fucking tears her up right in front of the little boy. And that scene is probably the one death that sticks to me the most out of the whole movie.
yeah, definitely. It really does. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what.
So getting story is officially found out his kids are out in the middle of the ocean. He decides to say fuck it because it's his children. He's gonna, when it comes to your kids, man, you lose your fear real quick and you'll go into anything to save them. So he steals the police boat and he comes and speeds for them.
Yeah, and it pretty much ends up becoming like a point where, because after a while, after once the kids are out there and they're pretty much stuck to a point where their boats are end up like stuck in and they have to pretty much get help. And there's a point where it even becomes, Brody has to save the day because even the Coast Guard comes out there, but it gets to a point where the shark actually latches on to the helicopter that they sent out there and actually ends up, destroying it and ends up actually killing and drowning the pilot and stuff, and
Yeah.
so they
This
actually
shark
do try
ain't
to push
playing
the
games.
stakes more with this.
Yeah, because you get that fucking helicopter getting drawn down, which was a pretty fucking cool ass scene, to be honest with you. But they're pretty much stuck like that at this point, and that's when Brody ends up finding them from a distance. And again, Brody has to face his fears once again to take on a shark, and he's pretty much at the same time trying to save everybody. This is when the shark is really tired of its waiting game, so it starts really, up in the stakes of trying to fucking kill these people. And pretty much Brody is now arrived and he's pretty much getting them into certain areas where they're safe on the island. And this is where we get the famous standoff with Brody and the shark. But only this time, Brody uses a electrical line. And the shark, he ends up doing another one-liner in this film. Not memorable like the first one, but this one was kind of a good one where he says, "Open your mouth, say ah," and then fucking kills the shark by electric shock.
Yeah, and that to me I thought was a good payoff because I like the way he's taunting him, like trying to be like, come on, come on, come on, it just
Well, he
it had
does
a.
that. His little boy is still like the only one stuck on a boat, and and everybody made it on the island but the little boy because his shit got stuck, so they couldn't pull him in. That's when Brody said "fuck it," and then started getting ready to take on the shark. And this is actually a pretty scary scene because this shark damn near gets fucking Brody because Brody's having to hold on to it while it comes up to him face to face.
Yeah, exactly, and so
But
yeah,
yeah,
and
it doesn't as memorable as the ending of the first movie. So, but anyways, going back to it, I did like the change up of the slasher feel. It was different. It's nothing like the first movie, but I don't think it's a bad movie per se. I do feel like it's very underrated at some point, and I felt like this concluded Brody's character. And honestly, from here,
honestly, this should have been the last Jaws movie if they
Yeah.
were going to make a sequel. This is the only likable sequel out of the bunch, and this is pretty much the end of Brody too, because Roy Shire did his part in coming back, and he didn't want to be involved in any more films. So I will say that I did kind of enjoy the film, and I think the proper grade I'm going to give this is a low compelling grade in the Film Freaks meter.
Yeah, I was gonna go with that too, because like I'm going with a low compelling grade on the film for each meter as well. Like the movie is the best sequel of the franchise, and it is very while it isn't as great, nowhere near as great as the first film. It still does its entertainment. It has a lot of its watchability to it. It's very underrated as far as like taking the type of slasher type of vibe that it goes for that really works with it, and it doesn't hold back. And I thought it was a good conclusion to Roy Scheider as being Brody one last time, and it was for the better. That I think if they would have just ended here, it probably wouldn't have to make any more sequels after that. You could have had this one and it could be just okay. Yeah, it's good it's great we have the first one, but it's okay to have a second one and just cap it off.
I did like the fact that they had Brody. What really made it like why I wish this was the last movie with Brody is it was kind of cool seeing Brody without help, and he
Yeah,
had to result to what he did in the first movie without any help and having to do it on his own. So
yeah.
this really does hold up as a good sequel. But now we get into where we get to where they go downhill really fast.
Yeah. Now the next one before we get into that, the second one that when it came out, it was actually quite a monumental hit. It actually had grossed over, well, it's grossed so far $200 million worldwide, and so it's not to this day like so. It was quite a big success for Universal to say, yeah, let's actually make sure let's go with this and start making more money off of that. And it showed that when it came to after that, Universal got desperate. And it also didn't help. It also factored in with this because now that we get to our third film, we get into the decade that they like to call the 3D craze. In 1980s, in the early 1980s, we were getting a lot of films of actual like big franchises that were turning 3D that decade. We had Friday the 13th in 3D. We had Amityville in 3D, and it only made sense for Jaws to pretty much take its advantage. And we get to the third film, which is Jaws 3, or as it was originally referred to, Jaws 3D, when it was released in theaters. And believe it or not, this was actually the only film in the franchise that has the audacity of being released alongside. I think it actually came out the same year as. No, it was the year after Friday the 13th Part 3 came out. So, yeah. And it's the only film in the franchise that, has pretty much is the only film in the franchise that actually takes place in outside of the Amityville area. And it's actually set in a different location altogether. It's in Florida this time. And and I'll admit, like, I'm here's the thing, before I get into it, on one hand, I can watch the film finally in 3D because I have a 3D TV and watching it, and on that watchability, it is watchable. But if you watch it without 3D, you're going to get into pretty much what makes the movie pretty bad. So let's get into it here.
Unfortunately, out of you had Friday 13th 3D Part 3 and some other films that did the whole 3D craze. This one focused so much on the 3D that it didn't pay attention to the people watch it in 2D. And because of that, visually, this film is damn near fucking unwatchable watching it on 2D. I'm sorry. When it comes to a lot of scenes. And we'll get into that in a second. And this film, like you said, takes us to SeaWorld in Florida. And this is many years later. And this one is following, I believe, the older brother or the younger brother?
It is the older brother. Actually, it follows both Brodies. They're both in this, but it's mainly focused on the older brother, Mike, and who's played by in this one, it stars a young Dennis Quaid in the role. And you also get
Yep.
early appearances from Leah Thompson as well, and also got Louis Gossett Jr. in it. So in this film, we deal with it's set in SeaWorld, where you have the Mike Brody, who runs the who are who's a marine biologist, and he's working at Florida in under the SeaWorld park. And at the very beginning, it ends up becoming pretty much a you can already tell that the movie was pretty much built for 3D, because that opening scene where it shows the titles come out and stuff, unless you're watching in 3D, there are a lot of shots where it holds on to it, where it's like coming out the screen like that, and like that there's stuff like pointing at the screen with the camera, that unless you watch it in 3D, it looks very off watching it in 2D, because it looks pretty weird.
And like every opening, we get another fucking opening of a typical, I believe, a typical death.
It's actually a fish. It actually shows a fish actually getting it like bitten in half or whatever, or its head flying at the screen, and it shows it in 3D. And like I was saying, it has a good advantage, because the opening credits where you're watching in 3D, you really get the feeling like you're there, like you're seeing the shit coming out the screen underwater and stuff. But watching it nowadays, if you watch that scene, the effects do not fucking hold up, especially that part where the fish is coming at the screen.
And give or take what you think about two still looks like it's shot on a very good budget, like one was. This is where we start seeing, okay, the budget's really dropped on this one. And now we're getting into the story that are marine biologists who are taking care of the SeaWorld park. And there's this new construction of this park getting ready opening, where it will allow people to walk under the ocean in these tubes. And it is in the process of getting ready to open on opening day. And it's bright as summer, tourist attraction, a lot of big things are happening, and we get a African American version of a mayor in this film, who is, I forgot the actor's name is, but he kind of reminds
Louis
he
Gossett
kind of he looks like Montel Williams a little bit. But an interesting theme I did not pay attention to this theme, and a lot of people actually pointed it out in their retro, so might as well point it out myself, because I kind of missed it until I focused it. Do you know there's a gay undertone to this movie, like Freddy's Revenge?
No, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, apparently it has a lot to do with the black guy who runs the park, because there's a lot of scenes from what I was told and what I've read in other reviews and backstories, where he refers to, look at them men, look at them my guys. He's referring to his the people who are getting ready to put on that show, and he's a lot of words that come out of his mouth where he says something sexy about a guy or something, and he comes off as very feminine. Not nothing bad to say, because he's a very cool character. It's just I just thought I would like to bring that up, because it's like Freddy's Revenge. Like Freddy's Revenge, this one has like a little bit of a gay undertone.
Yeah,
feminine.
Yeah,
it's not as prevalent as like Freddy's Revenge was, but it's there, and apparently it has a lot referring to that guy. He's actually gay.
Yeah, and yeah, I got you. And pretty much it becomes a series where it becomes to where the shark ends up getting access through the aquatic park after he kills a guy, and it shows the arm coming slowly up the screen, which, again, if you watch it 3D, looks pretty fun, but it don't look that good in 2D. But anyway, it basically deals with, also we're dealing with Mike and Sean, who really, if you break it down, like they don't really their characters in this are very uninteresting, because other than a brief reference to say that they've dealt with the situation before. My biggest problem from the start is the fact that you have the two brothers who are working at a aquatic park like this, and it's like, why would they want to do something like this when they know there's sharks around and stuff, and especially the shit they dealt with in the first two movies, and they really don't.
Really, what pisses me off more about this movie
it separates itself so far from the fucking other two that it's almost like it's its own. And it's with both films. I mean, well, the fourth one tries to go back, but we'll get to that. That's another fucking branch of shit. But this one, they pretty much try to do its own thing. They do reference, unfortunately, that Brody died of a fucking heart attack.
That's the fourth one.
Or was it the fourth one? Okay,
Yeah.
never mind. That refers it.
No,
I thought they referred their dad in this movie, or
they say,
at one.
Well, they say, yeah, all they reference is that, oh yeah, my because Mike's Dennis Quaid says he's like, yeah, my dad dealt with this. You know, we gotta do all this. But here's the problem: is that it actually takes a while before the two that Mike Brody ends up even pursuing anything to actually take control of or I'm sorry, try to take control of the situation, because most of the film there's a lot of shit that goes wrong and it doesn't even get to his attention with it. And it also, they don't really give him much to deal with. They don't give him much character development either. There's nothing interesting about him in this kind of, in the way it builds up to his character, because like we're saying, it's all style over substance this time because of all the special effects that overtake the story in this movie.
And that, I had a lot of problems with how the kids aged from the two and this one. They aged like this film was supposed to be set in 2000. And I have a lot of fucking issues with this because Dennis Quaid while he was young, he looked old. And his brother looked a lot older. They both looked older in this film. And it just didn't feel right. I'm like, something about the age just seems really off. But yeah, this one tries to stand alone on its own merit and doesn't even want to be really related to the other two movies. It wants to be its own story. And while it's a neat concept seeing a shark loose in SeaWorld, honestly, this should never been called Jaws. It could have been its own shark movie, and it would have been and still probably would not have been a better movie if they could have handled it a lot better. But they wanted this to be Jaws, not Jaws.
And that's my biggest problem too with that, is that there is a good concept you could do with Jaws at SeaWorld. Unfortunately, they waste that fucking opportunity because, not to jump the gun, but all the stuff that you're expecting Jaws to do at SeaWorld, they don't take to its full advantage. He doesn't actually get loose and actually, you know, killing like attendees there or anything that much. Instead, he's killing like other one-off characters that we don't even really, you know, pay attention to. Or I'm sorry, or people that are not even really like the actual guests at the park. You don't really get to take full advantage of what Jaws can do in this at SeaWorld. He doesn't attack the creatures. He doesn't even, hell, that whole scene where the fucking shark is like going around and he's trying to chase after the jet skiers, none of them get killed. You know, you had potential there.
Yeah, the body count really drops in this one. You don't really see a lot going on. They wasted an opportunity. They could have had something like maybe like Piranha, like how like shit hit the fan in the movie Piranha. They could have had that kind of approach, but they don't. The shark really doesn't do anything up until like the third act, because majority of this movie is really them taking care of fucking dolphins and shit. Most of this movie. There's a lot of log that drags the hell. This movie just drags and it just becomes just so boring and uninteresting. And I'm just like, okay, like I see the concepts, they're just not working. It's the out of 3 and 4, it's the only one I could put over on screen. I can you'll never pay me to put part 4 on TV. You can never give me money for that. But
that's what I'm saying.
There's nothing really going on. It just waits for it's just one long take to the third act. That's all it is.
It is. And
folks, just wait until we get to the third act. That's where the cool stuff is. Granted, yes, when they open the park, they're in those people in the tubes. I do like what they're trying to build with that. But the whole movie doesn't even do anything up until the fucking end. You can just watch the third act. That's it.
That's what I'm saying. But also, what's granted, there is some things I do think that the movie could have pushed with. Like the only two characters that I think, the only two actors I think actually kind of pulled the film off, given the material they were given for, was the expert that they call in for the shark killer, Fitzroyce, played by Simon McCorkindale. I thought
Yeah.
out of the main cast, he was actually the one that I thought actually had the most charisma, and he actually seemed like a character that could do something very interesting. Unfortunately, he's very wasted throughout the film, though, because they don't take full advantage of him, much like the concept. But I'm just saying that he was the only one that actually seemed like they had something going for his character.
Oh, if I remember correctly, they wasted on him trying to get fucking laid with the blonde girl.
Well, that, but
Instead,
also that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
But the way that he comes across, though, his performance, I thought was actually a lot more likable to watch compared to Dennis Quaid's performance, surprisingly. But I'm just saying his character on paper had something going because he was there to kill the shark, and you could have made something with his character work with it.
Yeah, he's pretty much a poor man's fucking Quint, but yeah, he was still doable. The only problems I do have, and I actually watch a lot of famous reviewers of this film, and again, seeing on my own merits and giving my own interpretation. Like I like to follow a guy called Dead Meat, and he broke these movies down really vividly. And one of my issues I did see with the character, that even though he is likable, what they could have done, but they wasted him completely, because really he's not that much of a badass whenever he gets fucking taken out pretty quickly, whenever
Yeah,
he's finally work. But anyways, this is where the unbelievable shit starts happening. But anyways, yeah, the whole movie, there's a lot of times where there's a part where he's flirting with a girl a lot of times. It's like, who gives a shit? Let's get to the fucking point of the movie. And
yeah,
of course, Disc Wade and the girl, their purpose is to be Brody and shut down the park until they get the shark under control. And pretty much just as it's all it is a very poor man's script of Jaws put in a SeaWorld, because it really is everybody is a certain character. You got the two representing Brody. You got the mayor, which is represented by the park owner, which is played by that black guy, and then the fucking shark killer is kind of a poor man's Quint. So it's like, okay, I see what you're fucking doing here, but you're doing it a straight to sci-fi level type of level. So it's like, so now we get to the third act where the shit hits the fan, which is kind of cool, because being a civilian walking through those, I always thought whenever I go to aquatic centers and watch sharks and stuff, and I walk through tubes, I think of this scene. So this is probably the only scene that really sticks to me as likable in the whole entire film, is when the shark is starting to bust the tubes and people are stuck in there. This
yeah.
is pretty much the and really walking. I go visit those like aquariums and shit. I think of that scene when I see sharks. I'm like, ooh, damn! I remember Jaws 3.
Yeah, I admit
So
the
I'll
movie
give it.
does. Yeah, when the movie gets to its third act, it does start to, kind of do some cool Jaws stuff to take advantage of it, because that is a good scene. I do like the way they try to push, a little bit of the tension there, even though it's very short lived, so to speak. Because I like the way that the shit is actually trying to go in and have the shark actually attack the people and stuff at the park.
And then we get to and we know this is going to be a very short talk, but we get to our fucking climax. And I'm going to be honest with you, and you haven't heard me rip the Jaws film yet. Wait until you hear me talk about 4. However, the scene where the shark is coming towards the screen is by far, and I actually think even the shark from part 4 looked better. The scene of the digital look of the shark of part 3, when he's coming at the windows and they realize he's gonna break the window of all the people, and they so slowly start screaming, which is a very tense scene. That shark looked fucking horrible. Like, that is by far the worst looking imagery, visual effects of a shark I've ever fucking seen.
I know
Oh
it
my
was like it
God.
was like
It
it
don't
was like
holy shit. And then the glass thing where he barely taps it and it looks like the shark is smiling. And then the fucking glass only goes to you. And no water is really pouring in yet. And then when it feels like it's like a scene cut. Then the water pours in, and all of our main cast are in this room, that control room, trying to save these people. And that's why they're in the room at first. But then the shark busts in, and somehow a guy that ain't wearing any oxygen is still alive. Isn't he alive or is he dead?
the main park owner.
Well,
I think
no, no, no,
yeah.
no. No, the fucking blonde dude. Yeah, I think he was dead, but when he was eating earlier, he had the bomb in his hand. That's what it was. He was already
Yeah, that's
dead.
what. Yeah.
And basically, yeah, you start seeing some people get chewed up and stuff, which is bloody, like this one Asian dude that gets chewed up. And
Well, there
yeah,
was that other
basically,
scene earlier too. You forgot where when Mike finds that dead body. That was pretty graphic when they showed the dead body of that one dude that they pull in the when they see the when Mike sees him where he just gags and it was like damn.
but yeah, they end up eating our poor man's version of Quint, and they see him inside the shark's body when he opens his mouth, and he had a bomb in his hand, and basically, one of the I think it was the girl who pulls the little trigger, and they basically hide. And it gives us the most god awful look of an explosion. It reminded me off of fucking Freddy Krueger in Part 6, where he's just
Oh
fucking at the screen in the 3D. I'm like, oh no, oh my god, this is bad.
yeah, that I would admit, like you were saying, that the effects, the way the shark comes slowly toward the screen, it looked like early fucking. Well, it wasn't CGI, but it's like if you didn't have CGI and you were using those kind of effects, you can tell it looked fucking poorly blue screen or green screen.
Yeah,
And the way
because
that the shark's teeth actually explodes at the screen, it was like I was watching. Yeah, like you were saying, when Freddy explodes and Freddy's dead, where it just looks so fucking bad.
it just keeps coming at the screen, boom, boom, boom. And just and it shows like the little pieces and stuff. It's like, oh my god, and
Yeah.
oh my god, it's just. I'm sorry if I skipped over a lot of shit, but this movie is actually the most really grounded and most boring paced film
Yeah,
of happening until we get to 4. And honestly, I can I I'm not really a big fan of this movie at all, but yeah, it's miles at least better than that piece of shit we're about to talk about next. But
yeah,
I didn't like anything hardly in this film other than the whole setting was really neat. The concept is good. The
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 3D.
SeaWorld, the whole tube scene really stands out to this day when I walk into when I go to aquatic centers and when I go and see shark, aquariums and stuff, it still holds up. Other than that, I really did not care for anything else in this film. These characters were pretty straight to video for me. Um, and really just trying to stand on its own. It should have just been another shark movie and not Jaws. So that being said, I got to give this film a disaster grade on Film Freaks meter.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like the movie is definitely like the my second least favorite of the franchise. It's definitely a very big fucking drop. The only
Yep.
reason I give it a little bit of benefit more is because like on way more than fucking 4 is because it is fun. It's only fun if you watch it in 3D. The characters themselves are forgettable. Other than Simon Corkindale and Louis Gossett's performances, which were the only two that really try to make the film work. The movie just and besides the 3D aspect and the way that you have the whole SeaWorld type of feel, unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's very downgraded to where unless you're watching 3D as a movie on its own, it drops pretty bad, and they
Yeah.
really waste a lot of
I actually,
opportunities with the shark.
I actually hear, and I've never seen it in 3D, but I hear like watching it in 3D and watching it in 2D while the story still ruins the movie completely and really you don't care much about anybody in the film,
but I hear that it's like watching two entirely different films visually.
It is.
Because unfortunately, I've never watched it in 3D, so I'm judging based off the 2D. You got to take an effect when you make a 3D movie. You got to make sure that you make the 2D part very well too. You can't just slowly make it only for 3D watchers. You can't do that. This was the worst example of a film that did it wrong, and it was god awful. So
yeah, because it does have its watchability if it's 3D, and it has more of what you expect as far as it having more entertainment with that. I kind of want to go a little yeah, because just on its own, just as somewhat fun, I'll go with High Disaster on it. Now, as the 2D version, if I grade that on its own, it's definitely a disaster. That to me was just pitiful, like fucking the way it's presented. Because you can tell too when you watch the effects, unless you watch in 3D, they're like fucking night and day compared to what they look like.
And now we get to what can I say? Though not only the most insulting film sequel to a franchise in history, but not only the worst creature feature of a shark or shark movie in general.
Yeah.
What not only what can I say? This not only a terrible film altogether, but possibly one of the worst, easily in the top 10, top 15 worst films ever made. We are now into what I like to call the bottom barrel digging through the septic tank of shit of all time film sequels. Jaws for the Revenge. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about in this one.
Yeah. Now.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Now we're at the what the fuck. This is insulting.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the review, before we get into the film, I like to point out that this was actually one of the first earliest reviews that I watched of Siskel and Ebert. Back when Siskel and Ebert, when I was finding old YouTube videos about when I was I think it was back in like 2009 when I was really getting into like critics and stuff, and I was starting to really get into like I was in that period where I was following like the Nostalgia Critic and like just films in general about like reviewing movies. I came across the Siskel and Ebert's video of this, and it to me probably holds up as my favorite review they did together because they actually quoted Siskel reported that just when you thought it was thought to go back into the theater.
You butchered that. When you thought it was safe to go back to the theater.
Yeah, that's what I meant. But
and boy, was that a fucking understatement on that because. And I also personally watched the review, and it's one of my personal favorites because it's fucking hilarious. And I can't disagree at all with their review. They were spot on. This was a fucking low blow and a fucking half. I'll get into more into what I gotta say about this pitiful, god awful, what the fuck, get this piece of shit and throw it in the fucking dumpster of a movie.
Now, before we get into it, there is a little bit of history about this one behind the scenes. The third one is basically ignored in this continuity.
Hey, before we get into this, wasn't 3 a success, or did it kind of?
Yeah, three was a hit. It was a modest success at the box office to the point where, I'm
trying to dissect why did 4 happen. That's why I'm trying to see where the success went. How do we lead to 4? Is what I'm trying to find out.
Despite its negative reviews, it was a commercial success for Universal. And it also gave the ability to promote a Jaws ride at Universal Studios after that came out. And this is actually a film that was basically behind the scenes. It was so rushed into production the way that it took place when they began production from the film, this is actually one of the shortest. This is actually the shortest production that they went through because it was shot in 9 months, from what I read, and it was basically it was shot. In fact, the shooting script had not been completed when filming began, and so the both Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss also refused to come back after the second film, and or after the first two movies. And the film also has no continuity from Jaws 3. On the official, when the movie was coming out, they read from Universal said that this was actually the true sequel to Jaws 2, and it was ignoring 3 altogether.
Exactly. I was about to state that 3 actually, this is where 3 was announced that it never happened. And they went back and got rid of 3 and said, all right, now we're going back because they were able to bring the wife back.
Yeah, they called it the third film of the remarkable Jaws trilogy, as they called it. And they were able to get back. One of the perks was that they were able to get back Lorraine Gary, who portrayed Ellen Brody from the first 2 movies. So you could tell that on paper they may have had potential if they would have went with it, but even still on paper, this is where I fucking question the concept of this, because the whole title that they went with is Jaws the Revenge, where in this story we deal with pretty much a shark. Not to jump the gun, the shark pretty much has a vendetta against the Brodies, and if you recall, in Jaws 2, actually one of the characters points out that sharks can't get personal.
Yeah, they can't get personal. This is the part where they take the franchise, which was realistic. Well, 3 borderline start going irrealistic, but this is at the point now they took fiction and said, let's just do some weird, crazy shit. This is the inspiration that which we got to movies like Sharknado in the future and stuff like this. So This is where they said you can make a whatever the fuck you want at this point. And wow. And unfortunately, the very first one to be the father of that kind of franchise, that genre, had to be Jaws 4, with the title Jaws next to it. And that's what came its inspiration to why we got these dumbass fucking sci-fi movies. And oh my god, man.
Yeah, and we
ignored 3, and this is years later. And I made a mistake of thinking it was in part 3, but no, now I stand corrected. We now open up to where Brody has officially died of a heart attack, is what they really do. And we open up with the Brody, who, by the way, like we said, 3 is ignored. And the youngest Brody ended up taking over his dad's position as chief of police. And this actually takes us back to Amityville and back to where the setting of the first was.
Yeah.
While the shocking beginning and going back to its roots was cool, but that only lasts 5 minutes because, boy, does this film shit on all films.
Oh yeah.
So
let's yeah.
So we start off with little Brody being killed off by a shark, and I will say that despite everything I hate about this film, hearing him scream and begging for his life is really kind of fucked up. I mean, that's basically. It was kind of shocking. It just came out of nowhere. But then again, it's shoehorned because you got to have the revenge thing going on. So it's whatever. And unfortunately, we lose the young Brody son. And now we're dealing with the mother coping with her youngest son's death. And now we get introduced to another character playing the older Brody's son, and he is I forgot what isn't he a marine biologist still in this one?
In this one, he's actually a
scientist or some shit.
He's a marine research scientist.
So what they do is they kind of steal the Quaid's character's
job, but then they said 3 don't count, so we're gonna use at least he can have that job still because that's what he was in 3.
No, in
And
3 he was
uh,
he was an engineer. He was just an engineer for SeaWorld. Where in here he's actually a marine research scientist.
he's a Marines research, and he's basically a hooper, a hooper in this one.
Yeah. And which is already from a problem from the start. I have 2 issues with this from the beginning. One,
Yeah,
why the fuck would a Brody be taking a job that requires requires the ocean when if this is going by continuity from the other 2 films, he would have took probably something completely different. And 2, uh, also with the way they already start the film out, letting us know that pretty much Chief Brody is pretty much dead. I hate when they
yeah,
do that shit when they kill characters off between movies. And what ruins it is when Ellen Brody ends up coming in to deal with reunite with her son and everything. They flat out say that fucking Chief Brody died of a heart attack, which to me completely ruins his character from the other 2 films.
Yeah, you want to hear the really fucked up thing about this story too is the fact that they killed him off because he stressed so much about sharks that he
Died of
fucking died
fear.
of died of fear, and it stretched him into a fucking stress induced heart attack and killed him. What the fuck? Whoever thought that was a smart idea needs to be fucking punched right in the fucking jaw and not be allowed to be in fucking movies again. Work in Hollywood.
Yeah.
That was fucking retarded. That is the dumbest shit I ever heard. And because of that, on top of losing her youngest son, now you follow the wife who is pretty much going through a lot of post-traumatic stress because sharks are haunting her family.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they thought that the smartest idea for a script was, instead of it being dream sequence, which we get, that a shark is trying to pay the Brody's family back for killing its family member from the other movie.
Which,
What?
okay, that's the whole fucking premise right there. That's so stupid. You're telling
That's just
because it's called the revenge.
yeah. And they're trying to unofficially hint that this is a child shark of the first movie. Are
Or
you
some type of
fucking
sibling or some type of relative of the other sharks. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
tell me this is like equivalent to my mom being a shark and I got pissed off because Brody killed my mom, and I'm going to come back years later and picture me as a shark going after revenge? Really? This fucking plot? Really? This is the
Well,
plot? Who
here's what's even funnier.
is this supposed to be some kind of fucking spoof? Because it ain't funny.
Well,
This is fucking
what was funny was there's actually a novelization that they had of the movie that's based on Jaws: The Revenge, and it even gets even more weirder. So in the book of the novelization of it, they claim that the reason why the shark is basically getting revenge is because he's actually under a voodoo type of spell or whatever. Yeah, imagine if they made that into the movie.
I mean, it couldn't have been any worse. I mean, they butchered at the in 10 minutes in, it's already fucked.
Yeah,
It's already.
yeah, and so we already get the opening scene with, like you were saying, with the Sean Brody who dies, and while it is, it is can give you the shock and all type of feeling. I have a problem with the way it's shot because you can't really focus on what's going on because the fucking camera will not. It's all shaky as hell. Um,
Yeah,
but
it is shockingly, but and there are parts that I do notice, like the screens really get to you, but the whole visually part you can't see it. Like it
right.
shakes fucking not to be a dickhead here when I say this, it shakes like Michael J. Fox was directing this movie because I was like, what the fuck? I mean, I was dizzy seeing this scene, and so anyways.
Yeah.
We started getting to some really crazy shit. So we finally get introduced to, the older brother who is a marine research scientist who lives in the Bahamas. And
Mm.
because of the tragic events of, losing his father to that heart attack and now the brother dying of a shark attack, he wants to get his mother away from Amityville permanently and offers for her to stay with him down in the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where we get to what the fuck kind of dumb shit. Who smoked meth? Number one. Who wrote this? And this script right here. And this is where we get to, like I said, the number one problem. Big fucking issue. If you go in there and type in the distance from Massachusetts to fucking Bahamas, and it's going to be a range between 2,000 to 4,000 miles. This same shark that killed the son apparently follows her while she's flying.
The shark leaves the Amityville Island and follows them all the way to the Bahamas.
The shark in Sharknadoes, the sharks in Sharknadoes, at least that film knew it was retarded. This film is literally trying to take itself seriously in its writing. This is like truly serious writing. I am baffled. I don't know a student who doesn't have any experience, let alone me, don't have experience in anything writing whatsoever, could have looked this a mile away and said, "What the fuck?" Oh, what the fuck? Who greenlit this? Needs to be punched. What the fuck? And it just gets gradually worse from there.
Yeah, because on top of that, you know what's also pretty what the fuck? Michael Caine's in this movie. He plays the pilot of a guy that's taking them uh, to the pilot of a plane that they're in, and it starts to really become two different movies at this point because
the pilot taking them to the island they live off of.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it basically becomes Michael Caine, whose character is starting to like try to get to know Mrs. Brody and Miss Brody, and it basically becomes two different movies because it's very like romanticized with the way that it plays it off, and where he's trying to get to know her and stuff, and you have other scenes that involve with the shark underwater and stuff. I feel like I'm watching two fucking different channels. Watching like I was watching TV and I went on to two different channels. One part will be a drama that's going on, and then another part is something on the fucking sci-fi channel.
Yeah, because there's a lot going on here, and here's what the fuck who smoked meth right in this film number 2 problem. We get Miss Brody. I get that she's suffering from a lot of loss, but when she starts seeing the actual scenes, like she was there for the events of not only the very first movie, partially the second movie, but she sees the events of her own son who died, which she wasn't watching when it happened. She keeps getting these dream sequences, and you're led to believe this shark is revenging her by making her see what he did.
Yeah, and I'm like, is Miss Brody psychic? Is she supposed to be a fucking X-Men or something?
Well, it's not just that. It's not the whole psychic part. It's led to believe the shark is really wanting her to see, to taunt her. It's led to believe that's the plot of this, of why she's seeing that. This is getting really at this point. And there's not really much to discuss. She moves down there. Suddenly, she starts feeling a lot better, but she bickers with her oldest son a lot. She's kind of a bitch at some scenes because I get that she's went through hell, but she becomes unlikable because, and her own son has this weird fetish of his mother falling in love again. It almost comes off as creepy because I get that he doesn't want his dad replaced, but the way he comes at it, it's almost like an ex-girlfriend you don't want to see moved on.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing. Like the scenes where she's kissing on another man. Who gives a fuck? It's your mother. Let her be happy. But
yeah.
To act like you're some crazy boyfriend, this is some incest shit.
Yeah,
right
and not just
this was
yeah, that was pretty awkward, and not just that, but the biggest this is where we get into a lot of the really insulting shit where or no really just like really bad way they went from the effects that start out masterful in the first film. We can really see the decline here because when we see the shark underwater, you don't have any suspense because you're literally seeing scenes where the shark is in full fucking view in broad daylight underwater, and it looks fake as hell. It looks pretty fucking bad.
Yeah. Animatronics are cool until you actually see the animatronics.
Yeah. And
Problems.
and not just that, but also the not to jump the gun here, but even when it gets to the shark actually doing shit, like you were saying earlier, when it starts to have her pretty much like noticing that she can basically feel the presence of the shark coming and stuff in scenes that are supposed to have where it shows the shark like attacking her the boat that her son's on and everything, or like the scene where she's getting that feeling like the shark is near. That all that stuff just feels very like the longevity is just completely thrown out the window. And
Yeah.
also, yeah, I got a bitch about the dream sequences because we have two of those that happen. The part where she's like underwater and in the water, and then she's getting attacked by the shark, wakes up. Then we have that other scene where her son starts dreaming of being attacked, and it's like, man, in the words of Gene Siskel, the dream sequences.
Yeah, this film is nothing more than a if you took Jaws and made him Freddy Krueger, because
Yeah,
there are dream sequences. Actually, there's way more dream sequences in this film alone than the entire Nightmare on Elm Street, which is based off of sleeping. How did
yeah,
they do that? What's the plot of that? And yeah, there's like they're trying to do some like weird fucking weird bond with the oldest son and the mother with that whole dream where they're both kind of dreaming the same shit. And that's what I'm saying. It goes back to like they're saying like the shark has some kind of power to make him say he's back and I'm getting revenge for what you did.
yeah,
And this is like got to be the dumbest shit I've ever seen written in films. One of the
yeah.
and the reason why I bitch about it is because it came from a classic.
Well, not
And
just
the
that,
more
but
this film, the more that it's making part three look like Jaws, the first movie. That's how bad this is.
it
I'm
is, but
like, oh,
also even
the
when we start to
embarrassing.
get into other stuff involving the shark, it becomes even more like missed opportunities still. Like there's a whole part where the shark is like, we're like because throughout the film, Miss Brody is having her family move to the Bahamas and stuff, and you get also the granddaughter that's in this time. And there's a part where the granddaughter is swimming and everything, and they end up having her on that little like raft or whatever, and the shark is trying to come near her, but the shark immediately goes for someone completely different. I'm like, okay, why didn't the shark actually like actually go right there where she was? It was fucking random.
So if you're gonna make this off the walls, balls of the walls, I'm after the family. It does throw that even its own stupid written plot out of the water when it does avoid getting her and goes after just somebody random. And of course, the body counts feel forced in this film. There ain't
Yeah,
many, but they are forced in this film. And then
yeah,
we get this a totally different plot, love story. Where like the older brother with his wife who's like a welder, and I really don't get the whole like she's addicted to welding thing. Cool, whatever. I don't give a shit at this point. And then we get the research thing where he's with this black Jamaican dude, kind of Rastafarian kind of guy, and it's his partner. And he's basically, I don't know what he, other than just a standard partner. I mean, just nothing is making complete sense in this film. It
yeah.
is godly all over the place. I
It
don't
is.
understand anything.
Well,
And really, the plot is nothing but dream sequences, romance, fall in love with, finally getting to move on, and wanting to get with Michael Caine. And what's funny, a little true story about Michael Caine when he was asked, "Why did you get involved in this piece of shit?" Oh, it bought me a new house.
yeah. He was like, yeah, that's what he said too. He was like, because he couldn't accept his Oscar for he actually won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Hannah and Her Sisters, and because he was shooting Jaws 4, he couldn't attend his Oscar. And he said that he said, I haven't seen the film, but I have seen the house that it bought, and it was definitely looks great.
I don't know. I think this movie is so goddamn bad. I'd be embarrassed if my name was attached to this. at all. I'm sorry, I could not be attached to this. I would have to take L and say, nah, I'm sorry. I'll find another way to make money.
Yeah, but it also doesn't help that that you're dealing with a pretty like very short movie too, because this movie's only about an hour and a half as well, and
Yeah,
so
this review, other than us bitching, is going to be very short because there really isn't much of a plot other than the romantic shit, the Nightmare on Elm Street bullshit going on, the voodoo psychic shit,
yeah,
the presence of knowing it's there, and then we get to our third fucking act where basically and that's what's wrong with this movie is you get the scene where you get like where like the mother is out like steals the boat, kind of like what Brody would do. And I know there was a part we left out where like something happens with the Jamaican dude, and because they're after the mother because they found out the mother got on the boat, stole their boat because she's like pissed off it's there somewhere, and she personally hasn't really seen it. And because of what happened at the events with the granddaughter, she gets pissed off and steals her boat. She's like, "I'm gonna kill this once and for all." And
right,
she's basically steals a boat. Michael does his thing with his plane trying to go find her, and the other two are after her. And we get basically just speed up the process because this movie is pissing me off the more I talk about it. We get the Hooper version with the black guy where he gets attacked by the shark. You get the
yeah,
Michael Caine who gets pulled, pretty much a shitty version of part 2 with the helicopter where he gets pulled down on his
yeah,
plane.
and his reaction is kind of funny too, where he's like, "Oh shit," when the shark tries to attack him.
I was saying I did laugh. At this point, I didn't give a fuck. It's just so bad. It's oh my god. But yeah,
Yeah,
he looks down. Oh shit.
yeah,
He gets
and then
pulled.
but what's funny about that is, well, there's two things. One, their plane basically crashes their plane sank in the water, and they're basically stuck on their boat, and
Yeah,
their boat is basically sinking, and it's
yeah,
like, how did exactly do they are they going to get like be able to get away from that? But also, here's the funny thing: the actual part where Michael Caine is in the water and he gets out and gets on the boat. This was also talked about in Cisco and Ebert's review. His shirt is completely dry because behind the scenes, it would I read that it was hours after they basically kept it dried out to where they had to wait until shooting, and they didn't even decide to put water on him or anything. They just basically kept it going. It's like, yeah, you'll be fine. Nobody will notice.
yeah. Well, we noticed, all right, but it doesn't matter. The movie was dead from day one. So,
Yeah, but
anyways,
yeah,
I
but here's also the
can't
stupid thing.
remember like whenever they get onto the boat, why did the black guy? Because I remember the part where they're all on the plane and they see the shark going at her, and fuck it, it looks terrible by then. But I know they crashed. And he said, "Oh shit," and it fucking pulled him down. And then you get the. I'm trying to remember the events how the black guy got attacked. Were
Well,
they
there's
on
the
the
part where,
time?
yeah, well, see, here's the thing. Not to jump the gun, but there's two endings that pretty much result with his character's fate. When he's in the boat,
Yeah,
he manages to get because what they're doing is they're trying to put together an explosive that's powered by electrical impulses.
yeah,
And when he moves into the front of the boat, the shark comes at him, giving him a chance to basically he pulls him under and basically while he's doing this, he puts the explosive in the shark's mouth, and well before he's taken underwater. So he gets pulled right there. Logically speaking, he wouldn't have survived. We'll get to that in a
no,
moment because basically there's two endings with this fate. But anyway, there's also the way it really ruins this whole thing with the whole putting the explosive in the shark's mouth is, for one, they're using this electrical device that can basically make a sound effect to where it goes by the shark's impulses. Here's what's fucking stupid about this though. When Michael Brody is doing this sensor thing or this impulse thing with the shark fucking roars.
yeah. I
I'm
think
like,
this is where people said I gave up. I mean, you should have gave up from the very first 10 minutes, but when this stupid third act comes, oh my god, this is bad. This is where pretty much the shark is basically going at the boat like it all the time in all the other movies, going after a Brody, going straight forward, and you get the damn music playing, and then they're hitting the impulses, and the shark is like standing up like it's got fucking legs, and it's roaring like a fucking T-Rex. And and then when this is happening, Miss Brody gets to drive the fucking boat, and she starts seeing herself as her husband, who was in the first movie. Get ready to say, "Smile, you son of a bitch." And this time, only she's seeing the events like she was there. She weren't even there, so how do you know what it looked like? And then she stabs him with that fucking wooden thing. Fucking the fin of it.
That was the original ending, yes. In the original ending, it had it to where she basically stabs the shark with the they ran the shark with the boat, mortally wounding it. And the shark then basically makes the whole boat break apart, and it forces everyone to pretty much get out of the boat. Now, that's the original ending of what test audiences saw. However, the ironic part was that was actually the better ending instead of the other ending, which was re-released in theaters after that, where because basically when that ending came out, audiences disapproved of it, and they also didn't like the fact that in that ending, the Jamaican guy actually died, and you don't see him come back. So to basically refit I guess it was part of reshoots or whatever. They ordered it to be shot for the foreign distribution, in which the shark gets stabbed with the bowsprit and then explodes all of a sudden.
Yeah, I
And
remember
then,
that other ending where they decided to go ahead and use the boat still, but this time a tap of the boat made it go boom, 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 and it was the most what the fuck
yeah,
explosion.
how would
And
a shark blow up from getting hit
because
by a
test
boat, man?
audiences wanted another fucking version of Hooper, they have to bring the Jamaican guy back. The only problem is that Jamaican guy being drowned, taken down that far deep in the ocean and bitten, like Quint was bitten, and he survived. No, 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 no,
No,
no,
you
no,
can't fucking tell me that.
no, no, no. All logic is gone. And that's pretty much the end of the movie. And this killed the entire franchise, but I'll not the first one because people are actually smart enough to differentiate the first one from the other movies. Thank God. But this
Yeah.
is pretty much put a stop to them making Jaws movies altogether, and rightfully so.
Well, and what's also funny is that whole part after they pretty much defeat the shark, it never explains how they escape because their plane actually crashed and it basically or it's underwater and their boat is underwater and it's like how did they get out of that? They
And
didn't
then
how did they get back to shore?
Yeah, Michael Caine's all right, which was kind of weird how he was all right.
Yeah.
And didn't they even have a wedding? Like
No.
they got married and stuff,
No.
or they were married?
No, it ended where they pretty much end up going back to where the on shore and they're on the airport and they end up leaving after that.
That's what I'm saying. But she's like leaving out of town with him somewhere or some shit.
No,
So
she
you're
decides
led
to
to believe,
stay.
yeah, that's
No, no,
right.
no,
But
that's right.
it's
No, he flies her back to Emily Island.
well, you're led to believe that she gets with him.
Yeah, because he goes with her back to Emmy.
So she pretty much remarries and that's it, and then all that shit. This movie, like I said, should have never been made. It was the worst thing. It's easily in my top 20, top 10 worst films ever made of all time. It has got to be one of the worst sequels to a film of all time. It is itself as a self movie. If it was his own movie and wasn't called Jaws and didn't have nothing, this was pointless entirely. I could take Sharknado films more serious than this. This, I didn't like the characters. I didn't like even the wife who I should like, who was in the first two movies. She downgraded heavily in this film. She was not a lead, and it's not her fault because really it's all the entire rest of the shit. Everything else was so bad it made her look bad, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think she really went on to do anything big because
No,
of it.
it was her last film to date.
Yeah, it killed her fucking career. It murdered it.
straight up murdered. And I'm surprised they didn't murder Kane. They got his career changed and did good for the rest on out. But holy shit, that was he borderline could have fucked himself with that. Everything. This is one of those films I cannot give you a pro. There's no pro. There's nothing.
Other than
This
some,
film. No, I
yeah.
can't give you. I can't give you nothing. It's just speechless to the point I don't want to own it. I think it's an insult to own it.
Yeah, it's one of those. I agree with you. This is everything that you get a typical cash grab and a really what ruins the entire franchise altogether with. And other than some unintentionally hilarious parts that I can watch with the movie in very small specks, yeah, this is basically the film that was just like they gave up. It was like, thank goodness we never got another movie after this because this right here is the epitome of what you don't do with a fucking iconic movie like Jaws.
Yeah, this I don't know why this was greenlit. I really don't. I will always ask that question, and I questioned everything. This should have been shit. This should have been thrown in the fucking bin and never talked about ever again. This is one of those films that if I was to go through my my collection and I saw I accidentally had this, I would fucking fling that son of a bitch and break it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hated everything about it. Everything. I hated it. I hate that it fucking exists.
Yeah, and so with that being said, with this being pretty much the absolute worst of the fucking franchise and everything that made Jaws the first, it is. I'm giving this a bottom of the barrel fucking flatline on the Film Freaks meter.
I'm giving this super, super low flatline. I'm talking about flatline as in it's dead. You can't resurrect it. No, sorry, there ain't no heartbeat. What's the time, doctor? 9:30. All right, it's dead. Put the covers over it. It's that dead. It's that flatline. It's over.
Yep,
I can't get any. I can't describe how flatline this movie is. Yeah, like I said, it's in my top 10 worst films ever made.
it is. And final after pretty much Jaws: The Revenge came out. After that, they were done with the films. It was a didn't make quite well. It made about 51 million worldwide out of its $23 million budget. And at that point, yeah, it was a low point of them Universal to say, yeah, we're done. Now, the legacy that Jaws left behind was also funny because at 2 years later, we would get a reference of Jaws actually making sequels in Back to the Future 2, where they reference how it gets up to Jaws 19. And I can only imagine if they actually got up to that number nowadays, that would have been pretty fucking hilarious.
You know what's really sad is the scene in Back to the Future 2's 3D thing without needing 3D glasses look better than the 3D in Part 3. And honestly, that split second was even better than 4.
Yeah, but even Marty's like, well, Shark still looks fake, but still it was just like, yeah, that was a great like way of saying, yeah, we got too ridiculous at that point.
I believe also Jaws 4 was the very first one out of all of them that was critically and audience bashed to the point it almost at one point had 0% rating. Like it had 0%.
I know 3 got pretty negative from the third one on critic standpoint, but this one, yeah, this actually holds a 0% as far as critics on the Revenge.
Yep, and it deserved it.
Yeah,
yep.
But also what left behind with Jaws, off topic, there were some other stuff that I'll briefly bring up that I've heard about and I've actually played, and one of them being I've heard about was the Jaws video game that came out in the NES. And from what I heard, it's kind of loosely based off of Jaws: The Revenge from the cover of it and the way it kind of plays out.
Yeah, unfortunately, the game I used to play it all the time. It was kind of like fuck. It was hard. and it had this ridiculous thing where you just go in a circle, and every now and then the shark would catch you, and you'd have to go underwater and shoot at it. And it'd be like a baby one, but eventually you'd have to take on the big motherfucker, and it was a bitch to play. And it really had really no point to it. And when you did have to fight, they had to pick out all fucking endings. Really, the fourth one? Fuck you.
Yeah. But also,
Fuck you, game. Whenever people threw the game, because the game just whatever. And then I remember they made a highly updated. I played that one.
Yeah, and years later, I believe it was in 2005. It was at the 40th. I believe it was at the 30th anniversary of. Was it or no? It was the 40th anniversary of Jaws. No, it was yeah. Sorry, it was the anniversary of Jaws. It was called Jaws Unleashed, and what it was is it was a game that was released on the PS2 and Xbox, and it ends up pretty much it's 30 years after the events of the first film, so it actually kind of plays out like a true sequel to the first movie, where in this time you actually get to be the shark and you go through around killing people and stuff. And I have the game myself, and I've been playing it, and from what I've played of it, it's actually not too bad. It has some problems here and there, and it's basically referred to as like Shark GTA type of clone because it has an open world and everything. But it's actually kind of a lot of fun though.
Okay, I've never played it, so I can't judge it. I played the NES, and yeah.
Yeah. In fact, there's actually a part where you're actually going to a part that's similar to SeaWorld where you get to start killing people. So Jaws Unleashed kind of answered fans' ways of, doing the concept better from the third movie.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, from what I played of it, it's actually not too bad of a game though. So Jaws to me overall as a franchise, like we were saying, the first film will always be the most iconic. It'll be the most best, and it's actually one of the few films that you couldn't remake.
Yeah,
That
you
Back
can't
to the
read.
Future
And
and
Back to the Future, that, and just some other ones like Wizard of Oz and stuff. And honestly, the first movie's a masterpiece. Second movie underrated. Third, okay, you're now no. And then fourth, oh my God, this has got to be the worst thing I've ever seen. And that just pretty much describes it. But I'll always will. I feel like the first one is a masterpiece, and you can always go back to it, and it will. I think it truly holds the test of time. I think 80, 100-year anniversary, it's still going to be watched and talked about. And people bring up movies like Citizen Kane and all these weird fucking classics I don't really see the point in liking. I don't get the whole love of it. I think Jaws would be considered Citizen Kane when it comes to referring to one of the greatest of all times. It's not my favorite film of all time, but it is up there.
yeah, definitely. And it's just one of those things like could there probably other shark movies that are, not really like it, but maybe, have that good style for it or have that good like making a good shark movie. Maybe you could probably eventually if you had the right material in the future, you probably could make something like Jaws, just not make it a part of the franchise. But Jaws will always be the epitome of how you do a great, not only a great movie overall, but how you do also a great shark movie. So
Yeah.
those you have also, yeah, and so we thank you so much for listening to our retrospective of the Jaws series. For those of you who have also seen all the Jaws movies, let us know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in our next review. We'll see you later.
Later.